my gosh, I love doing that, but I just don't have time for it. Man, I have heard people say that so many times before, and every time I do, it just makes me feel a little sad, you know? I assumed that it was just a normal part of adulthood, but that really sucks, you know? Why do we spend so much time working and doing chores and life admin and not enough time doing the things that actually make us feel good and make us feel happy? My name is Abby Gatling, and I'm going to shake up that saying today. I want to share with you a life hack that I've recently come across that will help you get more of what you love into your everyday life. So welcome. This is Creativity Uncovered, and this is my podcast where I uncover how everyday people find inspiration, get inventive, and open their imagination. And generally, I interview a guest and explore how they find creative solutions, and then we share some tried and tested ways for you to summon this creativity the next time you need it. But today, I want to share this life hack that I stumbled across recently because it's worked for me, and I think it will work for you too. This hack has let me add more of what I love into my life. You know, I really wish this was an intentional thing, but it wasn't. I just happened to come across it. And now that I've realized how much extra happiness this has brought into my life, I just knew I had to jump on here and share it with all my lovely Creativity Uncovered friends. So if you've been listening to this podcast for a few episodes now, you would know that I've interviewed a number of writers and authors recently. And I've just loved these chats because my guests have been so open and articulate and generally just fun to talk to. But embarrassingly, at some point, either on air or off air, I've had to actually confess to my guests that I don't know much about the genre they write about, because their particular style of writing is just not something I ever naturally gravitate to. Because you see, I don't read fantasies or epics, and actually I don't really love non-fiction books at all. The things I like to read are biographies and autobiographies. And I'm not picky about which ones I read. In fact, how I choose the next book I'm going to read is either if someone gifts it to me as a present, or they lend it to me, or my personal favorite is when I go to the op shop, I go to the thrift store, I find a secondhand book there, and I dive into it. Now, I don't mind who it's about. It could be about someone who I know well, or I've heard of in passing, or I may not even recognize them at all. And so I pick up these books and I read a lot about the life story and the journeys and the ups and downs of these people who are all generally famous, but they're all from all walks of life. Sometimes they're sports stars and sometimes they're politicians, actresses. There's someone who's done a good deed or someone who's done something epic like walking across Australia. But to me, it doesn't matter who it is or what they did. I just love reading these types of books. But like most busy people, I actually don't spend a lot of time reading. Well, not as much as I would like to anyway. And since I've been interviewing some authors recently, I've been kind of reflecting of what is it about them that I love? Why do I pretty much solely read biographies and autobiographies? Oh, and books about creativity. But what is it about this genre that draws me in? Because, as I said before, I'm not really fussed about who it's about. I just want to know their story. I love to understand people, and I love to know where they come from and where they're going. I love to know the journey along the way, the decisions that have been made along each step of that journey, the reasons for taking one path and not the other, the influence they've had on others and what influences others have had on them. how they've handled the lows, how they celebrate the highs, how they pick themselves back up again, how they pivoted, set new directions, and strode courageously forward. I'm just curious. I'm just curious to know all these things. I'm just always trying to understand what makes people tick and why do they do what they do. And there's another reason. You see, I'm quite a reflective person. I'm pretty self-critical, and I'm always assessing the way that I carry myself and the decisions that I've made and whether the path that I'm carving for myself is the best possible one. It's not a negative thing. It's just like I like to think deeply about things. And, potentially my training as a teacher has made me like this, because if you know a teacher, you know that teachers are the most reflective people out there. They're unbelievable. But to me, there's something about reading a summary of someone else's life that really makes me reflect on my own. And I often find myself wondering, would I have done the same thing if this were my story? If I were in their shoes, would I have done the same, or would I have done differently? Could I even do what they do? Could I do what they have done? And sometimes these books give me a really good insight into just another way of thinking. And hopefully this will make me less quick to judge, because I have known this insight into a particular situation. And sometimes these books, they just give me a chuckle or a grin, and they just make me feel happy for the rest of the day. So this is where my hack comes in. The one I mentioned earlier about squeezing in more of what you love into your day. Because after thinking about why I like biographies and autobiographies, my mind turned to this podcast, and I realized that actually this podcast is the same thing. So through Creativity Uncovered, I get to find people that I'm naturally curious about, just like picking up a book in the op shop, something that has piqued my interest in them. And then I research the guests and I find interesting things about the story that I want to know more about. So this is kind of going through the chapters of the book. But this is where it differs. So unlike reading a biography, during the podcast I actually get to delve deeper into some of these things that have caught my eye. And I get to ask questions and I get to clarify. I get to relate to them and I get to know them better. And I get to help them share their story with the world. But the crux of it is that I'm loving this podcast because it speaks to something that I love so much, which is discovering more about people, which is why I love biographies. And the podcast has, by accident, given me more time to do this thing that I love. So now, even though I don't get to read every single week, I do actually get to spend time with my guests every week. And I realize now that that's kind of the same thing. And I feel really, really happy that I've stumbled across this because, what is wrong with adding these extra opportunities to delve into the things that you love more regularly in your life? And this has got me thinking, how can we find new ways of injecting the things that we love into our lives? I mean, I found it through this podcast, but what else could I be doing to add more of my other interests into my daily routine? And how can you do this too? I mean, you certainly do not need to go to as much effort as making a podcast. For example, if I weren't doing the podcast, another way I could get my fix is simply by looking up more biopics on Netflix or YouTube. Or I could join more networking sessions to get to know the people in my local community. Or maybe even as simple as just asking better questions of my friends and my family and trying to get to know them a little deeper and a little better. So that's just my example, but what is yours? Like, what are the things that make you happy? And if you think about that thing and you get that in your mind, I want you to consider, what are some different ways that you can get that same feeling, that same reaction in your life in some other ways? So that's my hack. For me, it has worked out with combining something I love with creativity, and now I've realized it just makes me even happier when I do my podcast. But I'm super keen to hear from you all about this one. So send me a message or pop a comment onto the episode, because I want to know and I want to have a conversation about it. Because I truly believe that the more we talk about it, the more we share different opportunities for people to be able to tap into that happiness and that joy, it's going to give more opportunities for other people to do the same. And what is not to love about that? So thanks so much for tuning in to this solo episode of Creativity Uncovered today. I hope this episode has inspired you to think about what you love doing and you're just not doing enough in your life, and to start to explore the different ways that you may be able to splice that into your daily routine in other ways. And as always, I hope that this episode helps you summon creativity the next time that you need it. Take care. If you've made it this far, a huge thank you for your support and tuning into today's episode. Creativity Uncovered has been lovingly recorded on the land of the Cubby Cubby people, and we pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. This podcast has been produced by my amazing team here at Crisp Communications, and the music you just heard was composed by James Gatling. If you liked this episode, please do share it around and help us on our mission to unlock more creativity in this world. You can also hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episode releases.